Hey, friends, welcome back to the Big Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award winning director, producer, and author. And this is episode 538. If you've been joining me here on the podcast for a while, you know that this would usually be a solo episode of the Big Talk. And today I have an amazing interview to bring you instead. My latest book, The Invitation: Vital Conversations About Menopause, releases tomorrow, September 13th. And this week, we're dropping in with my co author, Alexandra Stockwell, MD, for a tender and beautiful conversation about it. I know, a book about menopause. I would not have imagined in a million years that I would write a book about menopause either. And I did, because I want you to not feel alone. This is not a science based book. It is literally a conversation between two women, Alexandra and me, and it's entertaining and intimate. All right, everybody, let's do this. Alexandra, I am so excited to be here with you today.
I'm so excited to be here with you as well. And I was thinking, we've had such rich conversations together over the years. And this one, people will hear raw, unedited, exactly how we engage with one another. And that seems exciting and tender, especially given our topic.
Absolutely. This is a very unique podcast for both of us. And I'm really, really excited to be in the space with you in this, using your gorgeous word, tender way. And as we kind of unpack and pull back the layers of what it is you, listener and viewer, are going to be experiencing, I want to kind of just take us back and give you an opportunity, Alexandra, to talk about our backstory with relationship to what it is we're talking about today, which is our brand new book, The Invitation: Vital Conversations About Menopause. Yes, y'all, we co authored a book about menopause, and we are going to talk about it today.
I have to say, each time I see or hear that title, I respond to a different element. But the one that I'm responding to right now is you saying our book. I think that is so real, the way that each of us as individuals have shared and created this book, and the way that together through our conversations, something greater has been born than what either one of us would have done. It's not that you wrote the first half and I wrote the second half. It's that we really wrote it together. And as we dive into that, I hope that while you're listening, you can experience the way that we play off of one another and end up in territory that neither one of us would have arrived in independently.
Beautifully said.
So if I go back, I received a message from you. You said, I don't have the exact text handy, but the gist was, I want to talk with you about something. And you are a powerhouse entrepreneur. I have been your student and client and collaborator, but in a supportive position. And so I got that. And as any entrepreneur in the coaching industry might imagine, the first thing I thought is, oh, you want to sell me something, which was not necessarily a negative, because you've sold me things that I've been really glad to buy, although I wasn't really feeling like I was going to be purchasing a coaching package with anybody in that moment. But if it hadn't been you, I probably just wouldn't have responded. That's how I handle these solicitations on Facebook. But it's you, and you are so intentional. So if you texted me, I was going to respond. That simple. And so I did, and you were not messaging me to sell me something, maybe to invite me and sell me on this vision. But why don't you say what it was that had you reach out?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I do remember not giving you any details and simply saying I want to talk with you about something.
Which, in a way,
Because
was a level of trust on both sides that set the tone for everything else we're sharing about our amazing book.
without question, I had full confidence that you would respond immediately and we would get on a call within days, which is what we did. And I had been thinking about this adventure, if you will, because my husband, Joe, planted the seed when I started talking about menopause that I should write a book about it, and that I should write a book called What to Expect When You're Sweating.
Which is so funny, but I want to clarify that you have such an international audience. In case you're not an American mother of a certain generation, you might not know that the same way you have a stroller, if you're in that demographic, you probably have a copy of What to Expect When You're Expecting and What to Expect in the First Year. So, to be talking about menopause along the lines of what to expect when you're sweating is just so brilliant, so poignant, and really so great.
It's also so Joe. And so he planted this seed, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't have a calling to write a book about menopause. I am not a doctor. I do not have a specialty in understanding hormones at all. I am simply a woman who is, at the time of this recording, 52 years old. And when I turned 50, I was very vocal about it. I feel it's my responsibility to model to other women how one can be at 50, and one can be as expansive as one desires. So Joe planted that seed, and probably a year and a half passed. And I thought, well, I am a woman who is a certain age. I have no kids, and I'm not a doctor. I would really love to have a conversation with someone that I love and respect, who has kids and who has a medical background. And you were the only person who I thought about, the one and only person. And you know this because we've had this conversation, but I'm sharing this with the listeners. If when I called you and you graciously, if you had said no, this book would not have happened, because I was not going to find another author. So we get on the call, and I'm going to toss the ball back over to you, and I make this offer.
Okay, so there are lots of things happening for me simultaneously, and I'm going to just share them in no particular order. First of all, collaborating with you is a treat. So, if given the opportunity, I want to say yes, regardless of what we're going to do together, because working with you is fun, it's deep, it's forward moving. We're not going to just be spinning our wheels. We're going to be taking action, and it's going to be intentional, and it's going to honor each of our experiences and whomever else we're serving. I already know that from other collaborations. So, given the opportunity, I want to say yes. On the other hand, I'm now 55, so I would have been 53 then. And, or no, this was, anyway, it was a year ago. Um, but I wasn't thinking of myself as a menopausal woman. I wasn't labeling myself. I wasn't evolving my identity. My period status has been the same for a while because I have an IUD in, and it just I have children. I had children in my 20s, my 30s, and my 40s. My youngest child is 11, so I'm certainly not nursing, but I am very much still in mothering a child who needs my energy, and I am very my life is interwoven with his, as well as my other child who's still at home. So, and I'm a doctor, but I don't practice medicine currently, and I never had a specialty in hormones or anything menopausal related, and I still don't. So I bring a certain way of thinking as a physician and a certain level of expertise in navigating physiological experiences from that perspective. But this isn't my area of expertise, and yet I also am a woman going through this time in life with the biography I have. How extraordinary to have the opportunity to explore that with you, knowing that we bring such different qualities to the table in terms of life experience, and yet we are so aligned in our value related to growth, personal growth, empowerment, service, inspiring and inviting and learning from others. And I really think, if I cut to the chase, what we've created really embodies everything that was present that we've just described from that first conversation.
Thank you for saying that. And thank you for saying yes to me.
Absolutely.
When we determined that we were going to collaborate on this book, I think there was many questions. How are we going to fit it in our schedules? What's it going to look like? What's the process? And one of the things that I loved about that exploration with you is you also were very intentional and you asked all the right questions. I'm a producer. I can produce anything out of thin air. I know how to do it. I can do it with my eyes closed. And when you asked all the questions about logistics, how we do it, and also shared that it was very important to you that this be filled with ease, we made a vow to one another that this would be easy. And do you feel like we've kept that vow to one another?
Yes, I do think there were some exceptions during the reviewing the copy and making sure the grammar was as it should be and there were no typos, that I wouldn't have described that as ease, but I gladly welcomed that exception in order to have the standards we have in our book. And otherwise, every interaction, the experience of discussing it, planning it, writing it, and making choices about the cover and everything about it, yes, it was filled with ease in a way that I think, if you weren't with us, you might not think that you can write a book with so much ease. But it was. And I also want to name, we discussed this in the book a little bit, but I think in conversation it will actually come through more richly, which is that menopause is not a part of your brand or explicit mission. It's not a part of my brand or explicit mission, even though it impacts women's voices, which is your, or all people's voices, quite frankly, is your area of expertise. And it certainly influences people's relationship and sensuality and sexuality, which is my area of expertise. But there was something that contributed to the ease in that the only agenda we had was our own growth, our own process, and having something that will serve and speak to our readers. This has never been about making money. It has been about inviting people into a better way of being a human.
And you're touching on what we spoke briefly about before we started recording, Alexandra, which was what's the objective of this conversation today? Our book drops tomorrow on September 13th. And yes, it would mean a lot to us if you would buy a book. However, what we really want is for all of the listeners, all of the women who are experiencing menopause or who are going to experience menopause, and your family and your partners and your friends. It is our objective that you have a conversation, that you open up a dialogue about what it means to be a woman who is a certain age and is experiencing a change in their bodies, in their hormones, in their thought process, because this is real. And again, just to highlight what you said, menopause is not my area of expertise. I just happen to be a woman who is 52 years old and I want to talk about it. Like ask all of my speakers, be vulnerable, share openly, be authentic with who you are. And I am walking that walk in service of you. So it's really our hope that this conversation and the vulnerability that Alexandra and I share with each other in front of all of you will serve you in having the conversation with your loved ones.
I just want to say the name of the book. This is I know we've mentioned it, but I just love it and it conveys everything we're talking about now. So if you didn't catch it the first time, it's called The Invitation: Vital Conversations About Menopause. And there's so many ways to extend an invitation. And the way that we have is by having a vital conversation about menopause with one another, as well as inviting a few particular people to join us in that conversation in the book. And so we hope the book itself has value, based on what we've spoken in our conversation, in our vital conversation that is in the book, which is actually laid out like a conversation, but that it also is just the starting point for the richest conversation that you'll have with the people in your life.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you're pointing out that the format of the book is a conversation. And that was important to both of us because we wanted it, I believe we, I will speak for myself. I wanted this to be a very intimate, behind the scenes look at two women who are having a conversation with each other, who also open up the conversation with other women so that we could highlight and showcase the diversity of experiences in menopause. And that was one of the reasons that I reached out to you, is I'm having a very unique, in my personal unique experience of how I'm navigating menopause and how I'm choosing to experience hot flashes, how I'm choosing to experience an intimate relationship. And I wanted to talk to other women about that as well, because I am having the time of my life. I've never had more energy. I've never had more sensuality. I've never had more productivity. And I also want to highlight the opposite of that, because the opposite is true for many of my colleagues and friends. So
And far more
coming to
common. It just is far more common.
right. So that was something that was important to me. And I would love to hear from you, Alexandra, about this conversation and what it illuminated for you. And I know the answer because we had the conversation, but just for our audience, share a little bit about what this conversation illuminated for you.
Okay, I'm going to say it, I'm going to set the stage indirectly. I once, let's see, I was in my 30s and I was at a training that was women's empowerment in a kind of sexy context. And the question was, what did you learn to call your genitals in childhood? And people raised their hand with different words. And then there were those of us who had never learned a word. And if you don't have a name for your genitals, then inherently your experience of your genitals are going to be less aware and more numb, which isn't to say that I wasn't having amazing orgasms or great sensual experiences, but it's like I just had my eyes closed in a certain way because I had no language to wrap around it. And once I realized that, I began this incredible journey to not just know the anatomical terms, because I already did. I was a physician when I had this experience, but to really connect in a new way with my eyes open. And I feel like our book, The Invitation Vital Conversations About Menopause, served in a similar way, that through our conversations, through realizing what were the topics we had opinions about, what were the topics that we had questions about, what did you know that I didn't, what did I know that you didn't, it illuminated my experience. And there's a way in which I think I was kind of going through my 50s. I mean, I have a lot of exciting things happening in my personal and professional life, but in terms of my relationship to my body and this significant change, I kind of just had my eyes closed, not literally, of course, but I don't have any dramatic symptoms. And so it was easy just not to put attention on it. And the richness of putting attention on my experience and seeing my thoughts and my feelings and my judgments and the freedom now that I have and the embrace of my experience, that really has been the most fruitful element, as well as taking something that could be so private and making it into something communal, which potentized and made it more sacred for me.
Mm. I love that you used the word communal. And I think that being in community with you during those 2 days when we dove into this conversation, that for me was such a warm hug and such a beautiful, I've written about this and I've done a podcast prior to this experience about how it was so intimate. That experience with you was one of the most intimate experiences I've had with another person. And
As
I
we
I
sat
really
across from one another at a table having a conversation, just to be really clear. I mean, I think we hugged at the beginning and at the end, but we just were sitting in chairs across from one another. But please go ahead.
thank you for setting that stage. That's very true. And every single thing about the space was intentional. Like I said, I'm a producer. We were on a very tight schedule. We made all of our deadlines. All the things happened exactly when they were supposed to, while creating this intimate container that we could just speak candidly in. And so there was this communal, sacred space that we were able to hold each other in and be available for each other. And that's also part of the objective here, is that we destigmatize what menopause is. We empower you to have a conversation and to be vulnerable about where you are in this experience, so that you, A, don't feel alone, and B, can create your own community so that you can lift each other up.
And if that sounds really exciting to you, go for it. And if that sounds appealing but a little bit terrifying, I really think reading our book and even discussing passages in it with another woman where you agree or you disagree, or it makes you think of some experience you had, or it makes you think of something that happened in a movie once that stayed in the back of your mind. Like, it really is an invitation. And I think we both orient to it as like we've built a particular cozy, spacious home around the woman's experience in menopause. Although I say the woman's experience, and I certainly mean and its influence on others in her life. This is a book that's very worthwhile reading if you're a man in a relationship with a woman or not. Like, it's still a very rich experience, because how often do you get to hear women talking with one another when you're not one? But even so, the book, it's like we've opened our doors, and anybody who wants to walk in, have some tea, sit on the comfy couch, listen to the birds sing, and let's have some conversation that includes whimsy and laughter and really profound challenges and settling in comfortably and expanding. Like, the whole book is literally an invitation to that experience. And any reader, we hope you take it your way and make it your own.
Absolutely. And I want to add to that, Alexandra, which is I I am very fearless, as you know, and when I'm in groups, communities, masterminds that happen to be mostly men, and they ask me, "What's going on? Share with the group. What are you working on?" And I fearlessly, with command, state, "I just wrote a book about menopause." And I see them all get very uncomfortable. What I find to be really wonderful and beautiful is several of them message me afterwards asking me for the link so they can share it with their loves. And that is something that I find, first of all, so endearing, that they have the courage to be the one to buy the book, and that they are not embarrassed because I am a woman who just wrote a book about menopause. There's nothing embarrassing about this. And I refuse to be small because of anyone else's story. And I think that is also part of this, is giving yourself permission to be empowered. And we interview an incredible woman, Pat Ducksworth, over in the UK, who has made a very successful career in the DEI space, teaching corporations how to include women who are having this experience of menopause. So we really have rich conversations, not only with menopause in the workplace, but with three of my colleagues who are all having very different experiences, which also touches on the healthcare system. So I think it's a really well rounded conversation.
I think so too. And any piece that we haven't covered, there's room for you to cover it in your own mind and in your own conversations because there's a context for it. And I just want to go a little bit further since you've shared with me where there are men who've heard you say this, and in particular, one where the relationship, the marriage had become very challenging as a result of the wife's menopausal experience, but they weren't discussing it. It was just causing trouble. And as a result of him picking up this book and just telling her about it and giving it to her, and they're reading it, things have softened and harmonized, and it's given them the language to speak honestly and collaboratively on how they can navigate this together, honoring both of their experiences. And so, sure, we were picturing that we were writing this book for women, which I said already, but so far, early on, as we record this, our most powerful impact has come through men taking up what's in this book and sharing it with the woman they love.
For sure. When you think about, besides community and having the courage to speak out about what your experience is, whether it's at home or at work or in community, what do you think about when you imagine the reader coming to the end of this journey with us on this book, Alexandra?
You know, as I heard you asking that question, one of the places my mind went is my own mother, who died before when I was in my 30s, and I never asked her about her menopause experience. And so I know I'm really glad my daughter has this book to read. And I really, one of the things that was coming to mind is that menopause is really something that passes through the maternal line. And in so many families, there's this disruption from mother to daughter, which may certainly in our lifetimes is likely to be more present when menstruation begins, but be missing when menstruation ends. And so that's one of the things that came to mind, that this is really an opportunity for healing and connection. So maybe I'll just say that.
I love that. And it's very meaningful to me that you're glad that your daughter has this book. That touches me.
Yeah.
I also want to add to that, which is I opened by sharing I don't have children. And just because you are in menopause does not lessen your maternal being, energy, vitality. It is just different. And it is a phase that we are all going to experience. And so I say that because I have birthed a lot of shows, I have birthed a lot of speeches, a lot of plays, a lot of musicals, a lot of content. And together we birthed this book. And so I want to just make it clear that this is a new way of having a conversation. And I know that for the first time, more women are talking publicly and openly about menopause. And I invite everyone who's listening to empower yourselves, whether it's with this book or with just a conversation, because we have an opportunity to change the paradigm for the next generation. And that is what I'm really excited about as well.
Yes, and there's something in the nature of having a conversation because, as we've said, the book really is a description of an edited description of our conversation. And if it had just been written in the first person or in singular or plural, there's a way in which it would have put us in positions of authority. And one of the things we really wanted to convey that we came to understand quite deeply through this process is that you, Tricia, are absolutely the authority on your own experience, and I, Alexandra, am the authority of my experience, and any other woman is the authority of their own experience. And yet there's nothing hierarchical or like we know best. There, we don't come with any of that energy. We come with the energy of, you know best, and have you considered this? And what are your thoughts about that? And oh, would you like to consult a professional about that? Or would you rather not? But you're the one who's going to know, and the answer might be one thing today and another tomorrow. And not because we're wishy washy, but because being sovereign in menopause is a newly evolving status, let's just say.
I love that. Being sovereign in menopause is a newly evolving status. So beautiful. Everyone who's listening, the invitation, Vital Conversations About Menopause, is available tomorrow, September 13th, on Amazon. We would love it if you would grab a copy in support of yourself, in support of your partner, in support of your family. And Alexandra, as always, any and all conversations we have elevate me, and I'm so appreciative of you. I so appreciate you joining Alexandra and me for this conversation today, everybody. I love doing this podcast in service of you. And if this show resonated at all with you, I would love for you to let me know. Find me on Instagram at Tricia Brouk and share with me what resonated the most with you. You can also rate, review, and subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. I appreciate your time. I appreciate how you show up in the world. And remember, your voice matters, everybody. Big love.